I would like to thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our Energy Week sponsors, the Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast, Eversource, and NH Saves. And thank you to our session sponsors, Sheehan Finney, Bass and Green, and VHB. I'm Josh Singer, Program Coordinator for Clean Energy New Hampshire, and I manage the Local Energy Solutions Work Group, where we work with local communities to achieve their clean energy goals, and the Drive Electric New Hampshire Coalition, where we are bringing together stakeholders to advance EVs and EV infrastructure in New Hampshire. I will be your host and moderator for this session. During the session, we will hear from Senator David Waters, who is the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, Kevin Bell, Vice President of Marketing at Loon Mountain Resort, and Jessica Wilcox, Transportation Program Specialist at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. We will start the presentation with a note from our sponsor, Tom Barak from Sheehan Finney, Bass and Green. Tom has happily driven an all-electric car for 5 years and sees EV infrastructure as a key to making everyone a happy EV driver. But first off, we have an introduction video for Energy Week
2022.
It's so fun to be here during my favorite week of the year, Energy Week.
We are excited to explore accelerating our energy transition with you through a great lineup of events.
This conference comes at an important moment.
71% of people living in New Hampshire would say yes, global warming is real.
Winter tourism is vital to the economic health of many of the more rural regions of New Hampshire.
New Hampshire's energy future is important to the Small Business Development Center because the more efficient small business can use energy, the more profitable they will become.
I love Energy Week because it's a great opportunity for people from all sectors to come together and learn about clean energy opportunities in New Hampshire.
The businesses, municipalities, and individuals represented here today are leading efforts to promote clean energy and move New Hampshire forward.
Together,
we are all a part of New Hampshire's energy future.
Well, thank you all very much for sharing this morning with us. My name is Tom Burak. I'm an attorney and consultant with the law firm of Sheehan Finney, Bass and Green in Manchester, and we are absolutely delighted to sponsor today's program on building the road to EVs in New Hampshire. From my perspective, the time is now for vehicles of an electric nature and for vehicle charging infrastructure. When you think about it, these are the signs of the times. These are the signs that we're seeing, and they could be the signs for some time to come. I will confess, though, that I have been somebody who for years have been watching the gas signs and always looking to find the best price. But about 5 years ago, I think that had worn thin with my family, and I decided that I would go actually and pick myself up an electric vehicle. I went to a local dealership and I took out a lease on actually the prior version of this car, a Chevrolet Bolt, which I love driving. It's really easy to drive. It's great fun to get around in. It's nimble, it's quick, and it takes me really everywhere I could possibly want to go in any weather conditions. Typically, I have a range, depending on a season of the year and speed that I'm driving, of 150 to 200 miles. 150 to 250 miles. And so I have a lot of flexibility here. It has a great little screen here. You can see whether you are either adding or taking power off your battery. Another big screen here that allows you to do all kinds of other things, such as looking at how you are charging your car. And just trying to advance my slides here. Why is this not advancing for me? We'll go this way. Here we go. And what I typically do is I will charge my car overnight so that it is ready for me by 7 in the morning. And it's really easy to charge when I have that time right in my own home. Here's my level 2 charger from Clipper Creek. And here is just the setup where I typically charge outside my garage. And I never have to worry about finding the next gas station because typically my gas station is right here. But there are times when I would like to be able to make longer trips, although I can make a trip into Boston and back in a day without having to recharge my car once I get there. It would be nice to be able to pick up more juice very quickly. And so one of the things that is so important for us to collectively do is to move toward developing fast chargers, an entire fast charging network, so that rather than taking, for example, 4 to 6 hours to recharge my car, I could put 80% of a charge back on in about 30 minutes with a unit like this. And this is really the goal. This is what the future should look like here for EVs. When you think about it, New England is a really incredibly beautiful place to live, to work, and to play. It's a compact area. It's easy to get around in generally with our current mix of vehicles. But the real challenge for us is to make sure that as we make the transition to electric vehicles, that we are in fact not creating what I learned in my 10 years as commissioner at the State Department of Environmental Services might be referred to as a donut hole. Forgive my cherry donut here, my cherry glazed donut, but here's what we really wouldn't want. We wouldn't want a situation where the states around us and the provinces in Canada as well are developing really significant EV charging infrastructure capabilities that make it much more desirable for people with EVs to head not into New Hampshire in the center of this whole universe, but actually out into the perimeter of it. There's no reason for us to allow that to happen. We have the resources, we have the know-how, we have the technology to make it go. We just need to find a way to do it. And as my dog Grace would say, what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. My colleague Mark Delorfano and I love talking about and working with and on these issues. They're a lot of fun, and so would love to chat with you further if you want to follow up in that way. But most importantly, we have a phenomenal panel for you here today. And again, as Grace would say, let's get the EV show on the road. And Josh, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm sorry for a couple of the technical difficulties we had at the beginning of the session, but I'll be turning it over to Kevin Bell, the Vice President of Marketing for Loon Mountain Resort. Loon has recently installed some EV charging stations, and we're going to be talking to Kevin about why they did that and how it's going.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Well, we are a Loon, right? We are located in Lincoln, and we are in a mountain destination area, as many other areas in Tom's donut hole there. And we're really 4 seasons, right? Our guests come and visit our area in all 4 seasons, and the vast majority are really passionate about the outdoors, and they're very environmentally conscious. And electric vehicles have been increasingly a better option and a more viable option for them in the past 4 or 5 years. We have seen growth certainly in our Lincoln Woodstock community at local lodging properties, adding those outside their facility, and we've added some here at the resort now. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough of them. I've spent much of this winter working with our parking teams on the arrival experience for a lot of our guests, and it's not uncommon for those to be all full by 8:30 in the morning. And when you're arriving at 9 or 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we're constantly having conversations with guests about, sorry, we're all full for electric vehicle chargers. And, it's a clear indication to us that it's become more of a priority for our guests visiting the area. Would we like to increase the number of chargers here at the resort? Absolutely. And we're looking into that. And we like to have them in a more prominent location. As you know, some of our local properties in town, those are, they're right out front and center, right in front of their buildings, right as in front of check-ins at hotels, really, prioritizing where electric vehicles are being put in a very, environmentally conscious location. Again, I don't have any hard data that says, how many guests are driving or EV vehicles, but I can tell you that it's certainly been on the increase in the last 4 or 5 years. The actions that we're taking here at the resort are, as we consider electric vehicles internally, is we actually put in a new purchasing policy for vehicles at our resort. So with it's going to be pickup trucks or side-by-sides or snowcats. We are looking at electrical options for all of those vehicle purchases. We currently own 2 electric RTVs, which our teams use to kind of get around the resort, fixing maintenance problems or general facility problems, and those have become a great option for us. Electric snowcats are something that are being developed by 2 of the leading manufacturers, but they're just not kind of a viable option for us right now because of the power demands that the machine has. And unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to get the use. They're not kind of equally as efficient for what we're using right now for a diesel powered. So we're hopeful that technology is coming around, but the leading manufacturers are certainly working on it. But we are looking at other options, whether that be, like I said, pickup trucks or shuttle buses, because we do have a kind of a vast shuttle network to local homeowners associations and lodging properties in the Lincoln Woodstock area. But that's something as we're considering as we move into the future here, because we are a destination and we have a lot of guests here, and they're looking for it, and we need to be conscious of these new technologies, because as you know, as Tom was speaking about before, the push is on. You see it; it's competitive out there. You see it in the car commercials, which brands are developing and introducing new EV vehicles, and that's not any different. Again, speaking to Tom's donut hole before, our neighbors are in competition for EV customers, right? And if we're in the hole of that donut, we're in the hole. And our proximity, New Hampshire's proximity to metro areas, Boston, the obvious one, but you have Montreal, you have Providence, you have Hartford, you have New York City, you have all these Eastern Seaboard locations. I mean, people are traveling, and they're being more conscious about the choices that they make, front and center, abandoning the oil pump or gas pump and going to EV. So we're competing against all of the other, certainly New England states, but those outside of New England as well. And certainly for us, I know, Canada, we're excited, the border's back open, and we'll be able to welcome those guests back again this summer, and just really more guests coming into our area. And that's how we, obviously, the tourism in New Hampshire is the best, right? We all know that. But it's, it has a direct effect on our economy, right? The opportunity for businesses like Loon or our local town to house these, EV chargers or fast chargers, as we're talking about. No longer is it just a kind of a stop at the gas station to fill up on snacks for the kids. It's an opportunity for a family to park in a town for 30 minutes and get out and run around and visit a business, go sit down and have lunch. It's not that quick grab and go kind of mentality. It's an opportunity for different locations, different mountain destinations, to really kind of cultivate a different experience, because you have these families that are making the choice with their electrical vehicle to visit your destination, sit down, get out, run around. I know when I think about my kids and stopping at rest stops, I don't like to run in and run out. I like to get out and do jumping jacks and run, and have some fun. And that is certainly an opportunity that it's a different mindset from the traditional kind of stop and pump mentality. So it's a transition, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it's important, outside of all of the economical or environmental impacts that transitioning to electric has, which I think we're very familiar with. But it changes the mentality of our operations, both locally as within the community and for a business like Loon's.
Thank you. I think you still have a little bit more time left if we'd like to take a question or two. For everyone, if you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the Q&A to the right side of the bar at the bottom of your screen. I think the ones that we've had right here are more about EVs in general, so we can wait a little bit longer. But there was a question in the chat about whether the chargers at Loon were Tesla or general or different types of chargers?
Yeah, we have 2 Tesla and 1 General.
Okay. And something that I'm wondering is, have you seen an uptick, I guess, in out-of-state EV drivers since installing?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't really say. What I can say is it happens every month of the year, which is different, right? We are, when you look at April, right? We're still open for skiing right now, by the way. But when you look at the end of April, beginning of May, which is our kind of transition season, we still see guests parking at our EV stations and during that time. So they're coming and visiting the area and noting that we are a location to charge. It's there's no like lag time, I guess, for guests visiting.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So we're going to take the rest of the questions at the end of this session. But please, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. And thank you so much, Kevin, for being here with us and talking about your new chargers at Loon and all the advancements you're doing there.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to Senator David Waters. He'll be talking about how much EV infrastructure is related to state policy and what is in store for New Hampshire and what has been happening and will continue to happen here. I'll turn it over to the Senator. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. And I want to really thank Josh Singer and Jessica Keeler for putting this great session together. And I just wanted to pause for a moment as well for everybody online to understand that we just can't do our policy work on these issues without the help of Clean Energy New Hampshire, Nature Conservancy, Drive Electric, New Hampshire auto dealers, charging industry, the utilities, and I'm sure lots out. But we really need that help in developing bills that can work, but also moving policy forward. And I got to tell you, Josh, I almost thought to suggest a revision of the title of this to building the bumpy road to EVs in New Hampshire, because there are a lot of potholes on the way. Just to look back a little bit, EV efforts arose from the increasing recognition that the climate crisis is going to demand decarbonization of transportation. We have made some progress on electricity generation through the renewable greenhouse gas initiative and energy efficiency efforts at New Hampshire Save and elsewhere. But it seemed to me a few years ago we needed to really focus on this. So we passed Senate Bills 517 and 575, and one tried to get into some of the kind of mechanics of parking and signage and directing the PUC to develop a docket on charging rates for EVs and some other things as well. And then another bill set up a commission, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Commission, and great commission. Kudos to my vice chair on that, Becky Oler, and others who worked so hard in that commission, and all the participants. And we really end up with a great report, which did provide something, a roadmap. It had maps for charging stations, some attempts to direct and cooperate with potential RFPs being developed out of the Volkswagen funds. And then, I think a lot of good suggestions for how we ought to move forward. And at that time, a few years ago, there were a lot of interest in the regional greenhouse gas initiative in other Northeast states about so-called transportation climate initiative, kind of a carbon pricing scheme in a way to move the transportation sector towards cleaner energy. There also was a memorandum of understanding on trucks and heavy vehicles, and a lot of discussion about states joining the CalLEV standards. Of course, there was also a backlash against this development, as we all know from our state and national politics. The fossil fuel industry, led by Americans for Prosperity, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, tried to really force us away from these efforts. And it was clear we would not join the Transportation Climate Initiative, and kind of set the stage for having to take some very different strategies about what we in New Hampshire could get done to fill that donut hole. Of course, this is a time that a lot of other states are moving forward quickly on EV infrastructure. So, I would look jealously at my colleagues down in Massachusetts, Senate and House, and Maine and elsewhere, Connecticut, and I would talk to them and said, I see what you're doing. I guess not New Hampshire yet. Because what they did is other states moved quickly to deploy the Volkswagen funds to provide subsidies for infrastructure as well for vehicle purchase on top of the state subsidies, set mandates for EV adoption, require utilities to deploy charging infrastructure and so on. And also using the CalREV because, if you're an auto dealer, you can't get the package that includes these vehicles if you're not a CalREV state. So that's really put a burden on the auto dealers that they're very, very concerned about, especially now as these vehicles are becoming so much more prevalent and so popular. We were able 2 years ago during COVID to get into statute further directives to the Public Utilities Commission about charging rates and some of the other principles from the commission. And I know we're going to hear from Jessica Wilcox about great progress now being made with the Volkswagen settlement funding on the RFP for the fast charge system. So some good progress there. And also we'll hear from Jessica about we're getting 17 million from the feds and potentially more out of the $2.5 to $5 billion grant pool that are for charging and for electric buses and so forth. So right now we've got 3 bills in play on electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. First, we have Senate Bill 447 that I worked on with the Commissioner of Department of Transportation and Department of Energy folks. Say, look, we're getting this federal money. We might get additional grant money. Let's set up a dedicated fund that can receive those funds, and let's put in statute the priorities that the legislature and the governor want. The governor, when we did get the VW settlement, Governor Sununu said, okay, the maximum amount that we can put into EVs, we should. That was a really good move, and we just got to get that money out the door. So I took those kind of categories, and they are the charging system on, fast charge system on the main arteries, but also secondary roads, level 2 and other charging funding could go to that. Also wanted to make sure state agencies had the funding that they needed for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And I think really importantly coming out of the commission was the request from municipalities to get some help for municipalities, private businesses to get the charging infrastructure, not only for the downtowns, but for some of those large employees. We also have Senate Bill 417. This is initially about the VW settlement funds for electric school buses. Again, we haven't been able to get that RFP done successfully, but I think this bill provides a model for how we can do it. A pilot program, use the funds we have, more that are coming in for electric school buses, and lay out the principles for how to do that. And I think most importantly is it sets up an MOU process whereby we can do vehicle to grid technology. So the price differential between the cost of a conventional diesel bus and an electric bus would be covered by the funds we have, but then the school districts could monetize, or the school bus companies could monetize the battery storage capacity, working with the utilities to actually perhaps get an income stream off of the battery storage capacity in that bill. And then finally, Senate Bill 448, which does 2 things. It kind of puts the State Energy Council into, that is established by memorandums of understanding to make reference to it and get it into state statute, and then moving towards electrifying the fleet. And so it sets up a planning process for both the fleet vehicle purchases and for the needed EV infrastructure with that. As I said, we have some money coming in from the feds that will help with that, potentially some grant funding as well. And so, fingers crossed. I keep trying at things, and I think we have a chance. Maybe it's got through the Senate unanimously, and it's just had the hearings in the House yesterday. So let me conclude by saying that I think what's starting to shift in the legislature is there really is a recognition that a change is coming. And the auto manufacturers are moving in this direction. Great new vehicles coming out. They're being advertised like crazy. Every Super Bowl ad, was for electric vehicles. Cadillac or F-150, be there. And this is changing attitudes in the legislature. So it's not so much oh, we don't believe this EV stuff. They're no good. They can't run in the winter. It's, what about the batteries? What about the fires? All that stuff. It's too okay. But how do we do this in a way that's good for New Hampshire consumers? I think also, though, that something else has become very clear, that the progress really needs to be at the municipal level, I think. And I'm just delighted to look at the chat and see people telling me, Keene, Peterborough, we got the stations, yay! And this is really important. I think that the municipalities can come together. They're doing it with the community aggregation now, and EVs could, charging off of solar and other sources could be a big part of that, I think. And I just want to mention too, kudos to Clean Energy New Hampshire and Drive Electric and the others here who are participating in having a University of New Hampshire graduate fellow through the Sustainability Institute this summer, who's going to develop a handbook for municipalities who want to move in the direction of electric vehicles. So there it is, Josh, in more than a nutshell, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think I'll continue asking one question after, just to forward a little bit, but in your opinion, for the attendees here, what can they do if they'd like to see more EV adoption in New Hampshire as a citizen of New Hampshire?
Well, this is a great thing about our democracy. You got 400 reps running around out there. I was one of them once, and you got 24 senators, and we do listen to constituents. I do think that mobilizing your municipalities and your chambers of commerce and other local groups who really, and the auto dealers, work with your local auto dealer, that this is a way to build momentum. And finally, I think, just to put in a plug, you've got to support these organizations that are sponsoring Clean Energy Week. They are doing good work in Concord. They are your voice, and it's not just it's your voice, but they bring a technical expertise to these issues that a lot of us just plain don't have. And so those are my suggestions, Josh.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. We're going to move on to Jessica Wilcox, who works with the NHDES. She is the transportation program specialist there, and one of the most knowledgeable people I know about in the state on EV infrastructure. She's going to be talking about the road to EVs in New Hampshire through federal funding, infrastructure legislation, and what's up next for New Hampshire. I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Josh. Can you see my screen? Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you're all good.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, good morning here. I am Jessica Wilcox, as Josh shared, and I'm happy to be joining this group this morning and talking a little bit about what's coming down the road in terms of electric vehicle support. As Senator Waters mentioned, there's been some interesting funding opportunities here in the state, and funding that's coming to the state to help kind of support this growth of electric vehicles in our state and support the visitors that are coming to our state driving electric vehicles. So Volkswagen trust funds, Senator Waters mentioned that this funding, is through the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust, has come to our state, and the opportunities that have come through that. So New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services was dedicated to be the lead agency last year, and was able to launch a portion of that funding. So the state received $31 million in Volkswagen trust funds, and 15% of that was dedicated to building out EV charging infrastructure in the state. So we were able to launch a funding opportunity to invite bids for direct current fast chargers, along with co-located level 2 charging at sites on different travel corridors around the state. So we were really looking to build out a backbone of fast charging with level 2 charging located at those sites as well, along certain transportation corridors that we knew were going to be heavily traveled and would help to support EV travel in our state. Now, this funding opportunity was open to anyone. So you could be the site host or you could be the vendor, but we were looking for folks to partner together and really just propose some great projects at these sites. Ultimately, the funding was eligible to cover up to 80% of project costs, or 100% if the EV chargers were going to be located on state or local government-owned property. Now, I'm just going to switch to a quick slide, but I'm going to come back to this one. What we were looking for was that each site would have at least 2 direct current fast charging stations, as well as level 2, that they would be networked, right? We want to look at data and how these are being used. That ultimately these DC fast chargers would be a minimum of 50 kilowatt of power, that they would have connectors for both the combined charging system and CHAdeMO that supports basically universal EV drivers, and that they would be located along dedicated corridors in our state. And so that included I-93, I-89, Route 16. So what was the result? Ultimately, we ended up getting 30 proposals from 14 applicants for 53 proposed EV charging deployment options. Now, 43 of those options, which represented 35 sites across 25 different New Hampshire towns and cities, actually met the minimum qualifications of the funding opportunity, right? So there's certain guidelines there. Now, these proposals are being formally evaluated by a scoring committee, and this is comprised of representatives from the Department of Energy here in our state, Department of Transportation, and Department of Environmental Services. So unfortunately, I can't share any more news on that. Those are confidential until contracts are awarded, but all the information's up on the website if you're interested. You can visit the site for more details. On top of this, we have a huge opportunity coming to our state through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is formerly known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or you might have heard it be called the Infrastructure Bill. Basically, it passed last year, tons of money coming to support infrastructure projects. And one component that is really interesting is that built into this is a target that by 2030, US electric vehicle sales will represent 50% of new cars sold. So it's a big target, and a lot of funding support and technical support is being built in to kind of move us forward in that goal. The intent is to create a national network of publicly accessible EV chargers. There's been a joint office from the Federal Department of Transportation and Department of Energy that's been established to develop all sorts of tools and support to drive these projects forward. And there's also a look at where batteries are sourced, how we might incorporate solar, as Senator Waters mentioned, using solar to supply electricity to these chargers, running your cars on sunshine, so to speak. So within the larger bipartisan infrastructure law, they've carved out a big bucket of funding for this National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or the NEVI program it's called. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Built into the NEVI program is a national goal of 500,000 EV chargers installed by 2030. So currently there's about 100,000 nationwide, so we've got a little ways to go, right? So the BIL invests a total of $7.5 billion overall into EV infrastructure programs. $5 billion of that is dedicated towards this NEVI program. It's a formula program, so each state is going to get a portion of funding. Within that $5 billion, $1 billion each year is going to be carved out and formula funded to the states across the nation. So New Hampshire, overall, we're going to be getting about $17 million. In year one, we're looking at about $2.5 million. Within that funding, 80% of this funding can be used towards these projects, but another 20% is going to have to come from either private funds or state funds. And then something I'm going to come to a little bit later is that there's $2.5 billion actually carved out as well of that 7.5 total. That's going to be used for discretionary grants. And these are going to be targeting corridors. Once again, I mentioned our travel corridors for Volkswagen, as well as community charging. So there may be some opportunity there. So that's where I think this group maybe wants to pay attention to. But let's talk a little bit more about NEVI quick. So this, the program guidance has been released, and basically New Hampshire Department of Transportation will be like the lead agency in our state for this funding. They will have to develop a deployment plan. And so within the guidance that was recently released by the joint office, they're giving us some information about what these state plans should entail, what types of projects will be eligible, how the program should be administered, and what types of technical assistance exists to help support that. So New Hampshire Department of Transportation will be developing this EV infrastructure deployment plan. It will be due on August 1st to the joint office. And this plan will need to highlight basically the installation, operation, and maintenance of EV charging infrastructure, how we're going to tackle that. The beauty of this, though, is that we don't have to have all of the information in place by August 1st. We submit this plan. It's going to be a plan that highlights methodology, that highlights process. It doesn't have to be, it's a living document. It's something that we'll be able to kind of revise each year. So built into that will be a lot of opportunity for public engagement to inform this plan and to inform future revisions of this plan. So how is this funding going to be utilized? Like, what will be eligible? So ultimately, this is to build out a nationwide network of public charging with a focus on our interstate highway system first, as well as our national highway system. This will be for publicly accessible with a priority for rural and disadvantaged communities. We are looking that the requirements for each of these sites will be that it's direct current fast charging every 50 miles and within 1 mile, 1 travel mile from the highway. And each of these sites should have at least 4 150 kilowatt direct current fast chargers with the combined charging system port. So direct current fast chargers have a couple different connectors. We're seeing here an effort to kind of prioritize the combined charging system as a standard, maybe network supplier or network port to supply energy to these EVs. And then once this nationwide network of chargers is fully built out, if there is remaining funds, those can be used by the state as the state sees fit. So there may be opportunity with any remaining funds for additional levels of charging and additional sites that are outside of that 50 mile and 1 travel mile from the highway. So the state template for this deployment plan was actually released in March, and that describes some details that the New Hampshire Department of Transportation will be looking into. Opportunities for this group, once again, will be that public engagement piece. So DES actually has a sign-up list. If you want to get on our NEVI sign-up sheet, we'll be obviously sending out information about those opportunities. So feel free to contact me if you're interested in getting on that list. But ultimately, like I said, there's going to be a lot of opportunity over these next 5 years to inform that plan because it's about articulating our vision and goals, our strategy, our methodology, our process. It doesn't have to be all the details up front. So there's going to be time to develop that deployment plan. Additionally, with this discretionary, that $2.5 billion that's been carved out for the discretionary grant program, there's additional opportunities here for New Hampshire towns and cities. Although a portion of that will still be dedicated to our designated corridors, our high traffic transportation corridors, think I-93, I-95. Another portion of that will be to get it dedicated to community charging. So here's where there may be opportunity for level 2 charging, which, as was mentioned earlier, invites EV drivers to come into your community and visit your stores and eat at your restaurants. So keep an eye out for more information. We don't have all the details yet on this discretionary grant program. This is all being developed, but a lot is happening, and it's exciting to see. So stay tuned for more. So what we don't know quite yet are some of the minimum standards and requirements for charging projects. More information is going to be published for our Department of Transportation on May 13th. We don't know all the details yet of that discretionary funding. As I mentioned, stay tuned for that. There are some other components such as Buy America requirements, because ultimately the program funds are really looking to kind of build out a workforce of EV folks that are, basically trained in how to install this technology, how to build this technology. So a lot of opportunity to really grow our workforce here. So it's made in America, by America is really the goal of this. And so a little bit on our alternative fuel corridors here in New Hampshire, just so that you're aware, since this funding, this initial bucket of $5 billion, of which New Hampshire is getting that $17 million, it's going to be dedicated to our interstates and national highway systems. What are those? Where are our interstates and what are our designated highways? So here's a big snapshot of what the work New Hampshire Department of Transportation and DES have done to basically designate these through the Federal Highways Alternative Fuel Corridor nomination process. So each year they've opened up this process, and DOT and DES have collaborated to nominate different corridors. And here's what we've got established so far. We've got I-89, 93, 95, the F.E. Everett Turnpike, New Hampshire Route 16, et cetera. If you're interested in more information on those, check out this article in the Clean Cities newsletter. And so currently, here's a big map of those existing corridors. The dark green corridors in the state are those that are considered to be EV ready. The light green are EV pending, but those designations don't really mean anything for the funding. The whole point of that funding is that we have these designated corridors. But what types of stations currently exist that meet the requirements of this program? We actually do have a handful of stations in the state that do meet the minimum requirements of the NEVI program. So those are mainly Electrify America stations that Electrify America has invested in and installed. So I just want to touch on real quick a couple of other buckets of funding and incentives here in the state. The New Hampshire Electric Cooperative actually has for their members incentives for EV charging installations, as well as for electric vehicles and even electric motorcycles. So if you're a member of the co-op, be sure to take advantage of those rebates and incentives. And then the U.S. Department of Agriculture also offers a rural business development grant. And basically, if you look at the map of what they consider rural, the only places that aren't rural appear to be Concord and Manchester. So there may be funding for EV charging installations through this grant program. And basically, if you're interested in installing an EV charger in your community and you're in that rural area, get a couple of letters of support from local businesses that are going to kind of say, yeah, EV charging in our community, that's going to draw in an EV workforce. It's going to support EV drivers in our communities. So opportunities exist, a lot of potential coming down the road, and it's exciting to kind of be on the cusp of all of this. Thank you again for your time and for the opportunity to share. I'll turn it back over to you, Josh.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So we have a lot of questions coming in. We have about 20 questions in the Q&A right now. We're going to try to get through most of those, but in the 15 minutes we have left, if we have anything left over, I'm going to be recording the chat and the Q&A so we can try and come up with a concise list of answers for everyone. But I've also prepared a list of, well, a fact sheet about EVs in New Hampshire and the pitfalls and or things that are going to be beneficial in the future for everyone. So if you are an attendee here, you'll be getting all of that information. And thank you for participating and throwing your question into the chat. Let's find something that will go right into this. So this is from an anonymous attendee for Kevin. At a resort like Loon, how do you schedule charging usage, i.e. skiers who plug into a level 2 charger and then go off to ski for extended wait time? So I guess how do you incentivize people to not sit at chargers and then move on so that you don't just park there for the entire time you're skiing?
It's a great question that I don't have the answer to. I think as we expand our stations, we'll have to consider that, right? And when we arrive and how we kind of control our, not necessarily maybe the charging ports per se, but the lots themselves, where they're positioned and when those open or when those close for the day or for the night. So I think that's how we would in the short term kind of manage that.
Yeah. So I guess if I could dig in a little bit more, are the chargers at Loon free or are they pay per use?
Free.
Okay. So that's something that, I mean, the only real way that I've seen to incentivize moving on from free chargers is just to have signs there that say that you need to move on. But the way that pay per use chargers would incentivize that would be to essentially charge you more if you are sitting there longer than when your car is not accepting a charge. So it would be at the rate that they have until your car is charged. And then for every, let's say 15 minutes more than that, it'll charge you $15 or something like that as you sit there. So that would be price signaling. But if you're not charging anyway, you can have signs or things like that to say people don't sit there. And then it's kind of like 15-minute parking where you have someone walk around and make sure that someone isn't taking up that spot. On that topic, are you from your current chargers, you said you had 3, I believe. Are you planning on increasing the number of charging stations you have based on the, I guess, usage there?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any definitive timelines on that because, and that has a lot to do with the location of where we propose putting them. Right now, they're kind of near our children's center and maintenance facility, so they're not really front and center. So I think as we look to expand, we're looking for a better, more visible location for expanding our stations.
Thank you. I guess this is for everyone. Let me know if you want to answer, but what are some of the limiting factors that might make it challenging for a business, municipality, or nonprofit? So I would choose one because I know that those are very different things. To install fast charger versus a level 2 charger as an EV driver, charging time makes all the difference. So there's a lot in that question, but I would say just the installation cost based on level 2 to fast charging is significant. And we can go over that. There's actually some information on that in the fact sheet I'm handing out, but the differences for the incentives and the ways that you install chargers between specifically a business and a municipality, or pretty much just a business or a municipality, are very different. So I mean, Senator Waters, can you talk on that briefly?
My immediate thought to that is that, yes, there's a big price differential between fast charge and level 2. And one of the issues that we're facing in New Hampshire right now is, will the PUC provide a ruling on two things? One is the demand charge. What is the rate of that electricity going out? And my bill, a few years ago now said, look, and last year too, you've got to figure out a pricing structure that's going to work. James Penfold threw something in the chat, and there it is.
Yes.
It's a business decision. But secondly, my bills include this, but this is going to be before the PUC. Is it a recoverable cost for the utilities to bring in the make ready? Because that can be expensive. If they can't have that as a recoverable cost, then the person who's putting in the station is going to have to pay for that, and that for the fast charge can be really expensive. So other states are doing both these things, and again, New Hampshire is a different territory, but I really hope that we will see positive rulings on those two issues.
Thank you. I guess on a similar topic, why aren't existing gas stations and rest areas racing to install EV chargers in their unused space to gain additional vehicle business? I think this could either go to Senator Waters or Jessica Wilcox. That you probably know the most concise way to answer that.
Did you want to jump in here, Senator Waters? I couldn't tell if you would.
Why don't you start with that, Jessica?
Okay, sure. So ultimately, I think gas stations are interested in installing charging stations. I think there's a big interest there, and I think just time will tell in terms of how this funding ultimately that's coming through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, how that's supposed to be directed. But I imagine that they're going to be at the table and very interested in that, because you're right. I mean, folks are already used to going there for fuel, right? So that does kind of make sense. But in terms of our rest areas, I think one of the challenges that we face is that federal requirements for rest areas, basically there's rules that you can't conduct commercial business at rest areas. So those that are eligible for fueling in restaurants, think Hooksett, that is one area where perhaps a rest area could invite more charging infrastructure. But in general, most of New Hampshire's rest areas were kind of held by that federal requirement to have no commercial activity at those spots. So I imagine we may see something at Hooks at some point down the road that's a really viable spot, and certainly a first point for a lot of EV visitors.
I'll just throw in there as well that this is an issue for the bus companies with the New Hampshire park and ride lots that were often built with federal funding. And I know this problem has been communicated to the federal delegation, and I know Congressman Pappas has been trying to work on the because he's on the transportation committee. If there would be a way for this purpose to allow commercial activities, namely being able to charge for electricity at these sites. I think we heard in the commission meetings too from convenience store operators and gas station operators, and they're interested, but it's the economics. How much it's going to cost to put the charges in, and what is the usage going to be for them? And I think that it's partly chicken and egg, that when we start to get a lot more cars, then I think that it will be worth their while to do that.
If I may just build on that very quickly, I think Senator Waters is exactly right. The challenge is the payback period. If it's too slow, it just economically, it doesn't work. And so trying to find ways to create the proper economic incentives so that commercial businesses will install these and know that they're not going to be losing money, or basically having space on their properties being used by things that aren't generating any income when they have other uses that could be generating income for them. So those are part of the economic challenges here, but it sounds like people are well tuned into them and trying to find ways to address them.
Thank you. We have a question about if anyone has approached automobile dealers in New Hampshire for being partners advocating for increased EV charging. That's exactly what we're doing with Drive Electric New Hampshire. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me and we can get you involved. Let's see, for general questions that are not specific. Will there be an effort to put chargers closer to populations? For example, the exit to Hanover is far from the town. That comes into some of the zoning and infrastructure issues. So the expense of moving chargers away from infrastructure that would lend itself to having a charger there, and works itself into some of this make-ready funding, which means getting the infrastructure ready to accept this type of infrastructure in New Hampshire. And again, there will be much more of this information through some of the links that I send out and some of the answers that we give after this talk. So that's more in depth than I think we can get into in the next 7 minutes. Jessica, can we hear more about electric school bus funding?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's almost a bit of a stay tuned. So the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has released some information about a clean school bus rebate program that they anticipate launching late this month, but I think we're still waiting on some detail there. Ultimately, that infrastructure bill that I mentioned earlier does provide about $5 billion over 5 years for a clean school bus rebate program. In the first cycle, which we're anticipating opening at the end of this month, half of those funds will be going towards zero emission school buses, but there's also going to be some funding in there for low emissions buses like compressed natural gas and propane and biodiesel, et cetera. Currently, the eligible recipients kind of exclude, and I think I'm going to say they exclude a lot of the student transportation providers. And the challenge with that is, I think in New Hampshire, a lot of our schools don't own their own buses, right? They contract those services out. So currently the definition for eligible contractors actually requires those contractors to be able to sell or to finance school bus purchases. So we have shared some information and feedback to EPA on that definition, since so many schools tend to contract those services out. But local towns and cities would be eligible for that funding. Priorities, once again, rural and disadvantaged communities. There is a small cost share. This will be a lottery selection, but it looks like they want to fund projects in each state. So I would say to any school districts and communities on the call today, start thinking about the potential for a project in your community, because that funding will be coming. But stay tuned for more. And we actually do have another mailing list for more information on that. If you want to reach out to me, I can get you added. Thanks.
Thank you. So this is I want to forward this to Kevin first. We have a question about permitting issues for EVSE installation. Did you encounter any issues when you were installing your chargers at Loon, specifically because you are, let's say, further away from probably main infrastructure lines, or did you encounter any demand charges in installing these chargers?
I don't know if we faced any of those issues. I doubt it, only because we have a lot of other power needs here at the resort, so we have a lot of power needs already. So I don't think it was a big issue to get that going for us. And like I said, other properties closer to the highway, for instance, or further into Lincoln and Woodstock area, have had, from my understanding, not much issue there as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Does anyone on the panel would like to talk about what a demand charge is and the issues of EVSE installation very briefly? Okay, I can go into that more in depth in the handouts afterward, as it can be.
Yeah, that'd be great. But let me just at this moment too, Josh, add a shout out to New Hampshire Electric Co-op, because they've really taken a lot of the lead on this. And if a business wants to, or a homeowner wants to do this, seamlessly. They know how to do it, and they're also taking the lead on the vehicle to grid, as some folks up in Plymouth. So there's expertise out there.
Thank you. And agreed that they've been doing a lot of great work for this and involving that into their, I guess, regulations outright, so that people don't get hit with these types of issues, but they can also read up on how to do this type of work. With 3 minutes left, I'm going to thank our sponsors, and thank you for joining us today for New Hampshire Energy Week's Building the Road to EVs in New Hampshire. Please be sure to stop by the Drive Electric New Hampshire booth at the virtual career fair, which is tomorrow, Thursday, April 14th from 11 to 1. You can sign up on the New Hampshire Energy Week website, nhenergyfuture.org. I'd like to again thank our Energy Week sponsors, Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast, Eversource New Hampshire, NH Saves, and our session sponsors, Sheehan Finney, Bass and Green, and VHB. Again, please refer any questions to either our panelists here or to myself at joshua@cleanenergynh.org, and I will be sending out a sheet with information on it and the presenter's slides post-webinar. If you're interested in doing any of this work or moving forward this type of legislation, get in touch with us, contact your legislator, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists, Jessica, Kevin, Senator Waters, Tom, Jessica, and Bruce, who's on the call right now, who helped organize this. Thank you and have a great week, everyone.